Have you ever felt that sting when someone ignores your call, leaves your message on read, or looks right through you as if you don't exist? In that moment, your mind races. You want to explain. You want to prove your worth. You want to chase after them so they finally understand what they've lost. But the more you try, the more invisible you feel. The Stoics knew this trap well. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that our peace is stolen the moment we tie it to someone else's approval. And Epictetus warned that the more we value what we cannot control, the less control we truly have. Think about that. Every time you beg for attention or try to justify your existence, you hand your power over to someone who may never value it. Real strength doesn't come from louder words or endless explanations. It comes from the kind of silence that refuses to chase, refuses to beg, and refuses to shrink just to be understood. Silence is not weakness, it's clarity. It's a quiet dignity that unsettles those who once thought they had control over you. In this video, we'll explore why silence is more than the absence of words. It's a superpower. If you've ever given too much, chased too hard, or explained yourself to the wrong people, stay with me. One truth here might change the way you carry yourself forever. Number 1, silence makes them feel your absence. Have you ever noticed how loud the absence of words can be? There are moments in life when your instinct urges you to speak, to defend yourself, to make sure they know your worth. Perhaps you've been ghosted by someone you trusted, disrespected in a room full of people, or brushed aside by someone you thought cared. In those moments, your heart races with the urge to send one more message, to write a long explanation, to chase after the acknowledgement that seems just out of reach. But here is the paradox. The more you speak, the less they listen. The more you chase, the further they run. And the more you explain, the more invisible your words become. The Stoics understood this deeply. Epictetus once said, "The more we value things outside our control, the less control we have." When you beg for understanding or cling to someone's attention, you're surrendering your peace to forces beyond your reach. True strength is not found in proving your point, but in withdrawing quietly, in refusing to play a game where the rules are rigged against you. Silence, far from being empty, becomes a shield. It says without saying, "I will not waste my spirit trying to be understood by those unwilling to understand themselves." Think of a candle in a dark room. When it burns, people notice its light, but when it suddenly goes out, the darkness it leaves behind is overwhelming. Silence works in the same way. When you stop giving, when you stop explaining, people suddenly feel the weight of your absence more than they ever valued your presence. They begin to wonder, why didn't he respond? Why didn't she fight back? Did they stop caring? That confusion unsettles them more than any long speech could. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that the best revenge is not to be like your enemy. To stay silent is not coldness. It is the refusal to descend into their chaos. I once heard a story about a man named Adrian. He had a friend who constantly belittled him in subtle ways, mocking him in front of others, ignoring his messages, never showing real respect. For a long time, Adrian tried to fix it. He explained, he defended, he wrote long texts about loyalty and friendship. Every word seemed to vanish into thin air, leaving him more drained than before. One day, Adrian chose silence. He stopped explaining, stopped reaching out. He simply walked away without anger, without a dramatic goodbye. At first, his friend laughed it off, but days later, that same friend began to call, then text, then ask others why Adrian wasn't responding. His silence became louder than any defense he could have spoken. And Adrian realized something powerful. He didn't need to be heard by someone who had never listened. His silence had set him free. That is the lesson silence teaches. It holds up a mirror to those who mistreat you. It forces them to confront their own actions without your words to soften the blow. You may think silence is passive, but in truth, it is active discipline. It demands strength to resist the pull of your emotions, to resist the urge to justify yourself. Seneca once wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." Much of the suffering we feel after rejection comes from replaying conversations, from imagining how we could have defended ourselves. But silence stops that cycle. It allows wounds to heal in stillness rather than in endless noise. Of course, silence will trigger people. They expect you to beg, to fight, to demand closure. When you don't, they are forced into discomfort. They don't have access to your energy anymore, and that unsettles them. But here's the truth. You don't owe them an explanation. Not anymore. The moment you choose silence, you reclaim the power you once gave away. You no longer bleed your emotions in front of people who cannot hold them. You no longer explain storms to those who choose to live indoors. Silence does not mean you do not care. It means you care too much for your own soul to leave it in unworthy hands. So when you step back without anger, when you let the silence speak, you send a message more profound than words could ever carry. You are saying, "I saw how you treated me, but my dignity does not need to scream. My peace is worth more than your validation." And in that moment, you shift the balance. You stop chasing and you let absence do the work. They may never admit it, but silence will echo in their mind longer than any explanation you could have given. This is why silence is not weakness, it is mastery. It's the quiet declaration that you belong to yourself, that you will not fight to be understood by people who cannot even understand themselves. And this, my friend, is the first truth of turning silence into your superpower. When you stop speaking to prove your worth, your absence begins to speak for you. Now, let's move deeper, because silence is not only about absence, it's also about presence. In the next part, we'll uncover why silence is not just a way to reclaim power, but a way to anchor your mind and shape the way others see you. Number 2, silence lets you hear the truth. Have you ever noticed how the world drowns you in noise the moment your heart breaks? You reach for your phone, call friends, scroll endlessly, or pour your story into someone else's ears, hoping their words will stitch up the wound. In betrayal, rejection, or loss, the instinct is to run toward sound, toward movement, toward anything that feels like relief. Yet the strange thing is, the more you chase answers in others, the less clarity you find. Their advice comforts for a moment, but it rarely heals. Deep down, you already know the truth, but you can't hear it while you're wrapped in all that noise. The Stoics understood this well. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." That is the power of silence. It isn't the denial of pain, it's the refusal to let pain be dictated by the outside world. When you grow still, when you step away from the noise, your mind slowly unclenches. In that quiet, the truth that was buried beneath your fear begins to rise. Suddenly, you start to see things for what they are. You realize, they never really respected me, I just pretended not to notice. Or, I am not angry because they left, I am angry because I stayed when I knew better. Or even, I don't need their closure, I need my own peace. These revelations don't come from another person's lips. They come in silence, when your own heart finally has space to speak. I once heard the story of a woman named Clara. She had been in a relationship for years with someone who constantly belittled her. Every time he dismissed her feelings, she would try to explain harder. Every time he ignored her, she sent longer messages, hoping he would finally understand. When the relationship finally ended, she was shattered. She turned to her friends, to her family, to endless late nights scrolling through forums, desperate for answers, but none of it healed the gnawing ache inside her. One evening, exhausted, she sat in her room without music, without distraction. She stayed silent long enough for her thoughts to settle, and in that silence, she realized the truth. She had been fighting to convince someone of her worth who never had the capacity to see it. The problem wasn't that he didn't understand. It was that she kept trying to make him. That night, she stopped explaining, and for the first time in years, she felt a quiet sense of dignity return. This is what silence gives you. It separates your emotions from your values. Emotions scream. Chase them. Prove yourself. Don't let them win. Values whisper, hold your dignity, protect your peace, let them go. Seneca once said, to be everywhere is to be nowhere, and that is the danger of constant noise. You scatter yourself so thin trying to be understood, you lose the ground you stand on. Silence gathers you back. It pulls your mind into focus. It reminds you that not every reaction deserves a response. Not every wound deserves to be explained, and not every ending needs to be defended. Modern society will tell you the opposite. Speak your truth, it insists. Don't let anyone silence you. But here's what people miss. Speaking louder doesn't always mean being heard. In fact, the louder you react, the easier it is to be dismissed as emotional, irrational, or needy. Silence, on the other hand, cannot be ignored. It is not weakness, it is control. When you remain quiet in the face of chaos, the truth has space to surface, not just for you, but for others too. People reveal themselves in silence. When you stop chasing, you see who chooses to come closer. When you stop explaining, you see who never intended to listen. You don't need to ask, do they care? Their actions will show you. I remember once being in a heated argument with someone I trusted. My instinct was to defend myself, to shout, to make sure my perspective was clear. Instead, I stayed silent, not in anger, but in restraint. In the hours that followed, I began to notice things I had ignored before. Their need to dominate, their lack of empathy, the way they twisted words to escape accountability. None of this required my voice to reveal. It revealed itself when I withheld mine. And in that clarity, I realized that continuing the fight would have meant losing myself. Silence had already given me the answer. This is why the Stoics valued stillness. They knew that clarity rarely comes in the rush of reaction. It comes in the pause before the storm, in the choice to wait, to reflect, to see things as they truly are, rather than as your emotions demand. Silence is not passive, it is focused. It is the discipline of stepping back until you can respond with wisdom instead of reacting with pain. So when you feel overwhelmed, betrayed, or desperate to be heard, resist the urge to speak. Resist the need to prove. Go quiet. Be still. The truth you're searching for isn't out there. It's in you, and it waits for the silence to surface. And this leads us to the next truth. Silence is not only a way to hear yourself more clearly, it is also a way to shift the balance of power in every interaction. Number 3, begging for closure is self-betrayal. Have you ever found yourself staring at your phone, drafting the perfect message you hope will bring peace? Maybe you've rehearsed the words 100 times in your head. If only I explain it this way, maybe they'll finally understand. Maybe they'll admit they were wrong, or at least tell you why they hurt you. That longing for closure can feel like oxygen when your heart is raw. Yet here is the cruel irony: chasing closure rarely heals you. More often, it deepens the wound. The Stoics saw this with clarity. Epictetus once said, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." At first, this might not sound like it applies, but think about it. When you stop pleading for an explanation and start living your truth, you stop giving others the power to decide when your healing begins. Closure is not something they hand you, it is something you claim in silence. To beg for it is to betray yourself, to abandon your dignity in the hope that someone else will validate your pain. I once heard of a man named Julian who was left abruptly by a partner he deeply loved. She gave no explanation, just silence. For weeks, he tortured himself, replaying every memory, sending messages that were never answered, asking mutual friends why she had walked away. He wanted one last conversation, one final explanation that would tie the story together neatly. But when he finally managed to meet her face to face, her response was cold, distant, as if she had already closed the chapter long ago. Instead of relief, Julian felt crushed all over again. He realized that what he had been chasing was not truth, but the illusion that she could give him peace. The very act of begging for closure had chained him longer to the hurt he was trying to escape. This is the trap many fall into. The cycle goes like this. They hurt you, you demand answers, they respond with indifference or avoidance, and you sink deeper into despair. The more you push, the clearer it becomes. They are not capable of giving what you seek, and the more you insist, the more you wound yourself. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." To keep begging for closure is to hand that power away. It is to say, "My peace depends on your words," when in reality, your peace has always been yours to create. The harsh but liberating truth is this: if they truly cared, you wouldn't have to beg for closure. Respectful people give it freely. Those who don't give it are telling you all you need to know. Your silence then becomes the closure. By stepping back, by refusing to explain further, you declare that their lack of care is answer enough. Think of closure like standing at a locked door. You knock and knock, hoping someone will open, but the longer you stay, the more time you waste in front of a place you were never meant to remain. Silence is the moment you stop knocking. It is the moment you turn away and walk toward a different door, one that leads back to your own self-respect. Of course, ego complicates this. We want to be seen as the good one, the misunderstood one, the person who gave everything. We imagine that if they finally understood our side, it would redeem the pain. But the Stoics warn against this temptation. Seneca reminded us that to wish to be well thought of by those you do not respect is to dishonor yourself. The hunger to be understood by someone who has already chosen to disregard you is not strength. It is a subtle form of self-abandonment. It is seeking worth in a place that has none to offer. A woman named Elena once shared her story of chasing closure with her estranged father. He had left when she was a child and ignored her attempts to reconnect as an adult. For years, she sent letters, pouring her soul onto paper, begging for acknowledgement, even anger, anything that would prove he remembered. When she finally received a short reply, it was dismissive, almost cruel. That was the moment she realized. No matter how many words she wrote, he would never provide the closure she imagined. The act of seeking it from him was keeping her trapped. So she stopped writing. She embraced silence, not as surrender, but as freedom. Her closure came not from him, but from the realization that she could honor her own worth without his permission. This is what it means to embody philosophy instead of explaining it. To stop writing unsent letters. To stop crafting the perfect message. To stop waiting for someone else to repair what they broke. Real closure is not a final conversation. It is the decision to walk away without needing one. It is the recognition that the silence they left you with is not emptiness, but information. It tells you everything you need to know. They gave you what they could, and it wasn't enough. That is not a reflection of your value. It is a reflection of their limit. And so, the act of going silent becomes an act of healing. You give up the desperate chase for validation and breathe again. You learn that the people who hurt you don't need to understand your worth. You do. The ones who left don't need to say goodbye. You can say it in the way you choose to move forward. The ones who ghosted don't need another chance. Your silence is the answer they never expected. Closure, then, is not granted. It is claimed. It is not begged for. It is chosen. When you stop chasing it in others, you find it in yourself. And in that discovery, you reclaim the dignity and peace you once surrendered. So let your silence be your closure. Let it be the breath of self-respect filling your lungs again. And when you do, you'll realize that silence is not only an ending, but also the beginning of an entirely new way to live. Share your thoughts in the comments. What truth about silence resonated with you most? And if this message spoke to you, subscribe now so you never miss the next step on this Stoic path. Number 4. Silence reveals what words hide. Have you ever listened to someone speak beautifully only to realize later that their actions told a very different story? Words are soft and flexible. They can be shaped to sound right, to soothe, to convince, even to deceive. People apologize, they explain, they justify, they weave narratives to protect themselves. But silence, it cannot be shaped in the same way. It does not bend to illusions. It reveals. Emerson once said, "What you do speaks so loudly that I cannot hear what you say." The Stoics lived by this wisdom. They did not measure a man by his apologies or his promises, but by the consistency of his behavior. And the surest way to see a person's truth is not by listening harder. It is by speaking less, by stepping back, by letting silence strip away the mask that words construct. Silence is not passive. It is observant. When you stop explaining yourself, you create space, and in that space, people reveal themselves. Watch long enough, and you'll see their patterns. The one who respects you will miss your presence and reach back with sincerity. The one who only took advantage will vanish because there is no longer anything to gain. And the one who sought control over you will become unsettled, maybe even angry, not because you wronged them, but because they've lost the leverage your words once gave them. Seneca warned, "Truth lies open to everyone. It has not yet been monopolized." But most of us cover that truth with noise, filling the air with explanations that protect others from accountability. When you fall silent, you stop protecting them. You let their actions or their absence become their only defense. Consider the story of Daniel, a man who had a friend that constantly spoke in grand terms about loyalty and respect. Whenever there was tension, this friend could always spin the right words. "You know I've got your back. I'd never betray you. I value this friendship more than anything." Yet Daniel began to notice the small betrayals, commitments broken, messages ignored, subtle manipulations disguised as jokes. Each time the friend would cover it with words, and Daniel, eager to believe, would accept them. But one day, Daniel decided not to argue, not to confront with long explanations. He chose silence. He stopped initiating, stopped explaining how he felt, stopped trying to force understanding. What happened? The friend drifted away, no longer tethered by the energy Daniel had been pouring into the bond. And in that silence, Daniel realized what was always true. The friendship had never been equal. Words had hidden it. Silence exposed it. This is the uncomfortable clarity silence brings. It reveals who cares and who doesn't, who values you and who only values what you provide. Words can create illusions, but silence removes the veil. You don't need to set traps, don't need to demand tests of loyalty. Simply go quiet and observe. Who checks in when you stop speaking? Who grows restless when they can't provoke your reaction? Who disappears altogether when your explanations no longer feed them? The answers arrive without drama, without confrontation, answers delivered by silence itself. And though it may sting, silence often cuts deeper than confrontation. People can argue against your words, dismiss your opinions, twist your sentences. But what they cannot argue with is absence. They cannot dismiss the stillness of someone who no longer participates in the game. Your silence becomes a mirror, forcing them to see their own reflection without the shield of your explanations. That is why silence unsettles manipulators, why it distances users, why it brings the loyal closer. It cannot be manipulated. The Stoics valued this clarity. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily to look at actions, not words, to see things as they are, not as they are spoken. In silence, you practice that discipline. You begin to trust patterns over promises, behavior over speeches, energy over explanations. You stop asking, "Why did they treat me this way?" and realize that their treatment is the answer. Their distance, their anger, their apathy, these are confessions more honest than any apology. So the next time someone tries to weave their way back into your life with polished words, resist the urge to respond quickly. Do not be seduced by sentences crafted to sound right. Step back, stay quiet, and observe. In your silence, you give them room to reveal who they truly are, and when they do, believe it. That is not coldness, that is clarity, that is not cruelty, that is discernment, that is not weakness, that is emotional discipline. Because silence does not only expose others, it refines you. It teaches you to live in alignment with truth rather than illusion, to value what is real over what is spoken. And in that way, silence is not just a tool of survival, it is a philosophy of strength. Carry this with you, and you'll see why the next truth matters even more. Silence doesn't only reveal what others are hiding, it also builds a presence that cannot be ignored. Number 5. Silence is the highest confidence. Have you ever felt that burning urge to defend yourself when someone twists your words, doubts your intentions, or misjudges your character? It's natural to want to cry out, "That's not who I am," to lay your heart bare and force them to see you clearly. Yet the more you chase that validation, the further it slips away. Explaining yourself to those determined to misunderstand you does not restore your dignity, it drains it. The Stoics knew this well. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Don't waste what remains of your life in speculating about your neighbors unless with a view to some mutual benefit." Every time you try to prove your worth to another, you're spending life's most precious resource, time, on someone else's judgment. That is not strength. That is fear disguised as explanation. Real confidence is not loud, nor is it desperate to be seen. Real confidence is quiet, rooted, unshakable. It is found in the man or woman who no longer feels the need to defend themselves because they already know who they are. Their intentions are clean, their actions are aligned, and their value is self-evident, even if others refuse to see it. To refrain from explaining is not arrogance, it is peace. Peace with oneself. Consider the story of Livia, who worked tirelessly in her career. She was dedicated, consistent, always showing up with integrity. Yet there were colleagues who whispered behind her back, suggesting she was manipulative, that her ambition meant she couldn't be trusted. For a while she tried to explain, tried to prove her loyalty, tried to soften her edges to make them feel comfortable. But the more she explained, the more they twisted her words. Finally, she chose silence. She stopped justifying her decisions, stopped defending herself against shadows, stopped explaining why she was the way she was. She let her work and her presence speak for her. Over time, those who mattered saw her clearly, and those who only sought to control her perception faded away. In her silence, she found freedom. This is the courage Stoicism cultivates. Seneca once reminded, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." The same is true of explanations. The one who craves understanding from everyone will always feel poor in spirit. But the one who can be misunderstood without needing to protest, that one is rich in inner strength. For most people, misunderstanding is intolerable. They cannot bear to be seen in the wrong light, so they scramble to correct, to defend, to explain. But the Stoic sees this trap and steps away. They understand that most people are not seeking to understand you at all. They are seeking to control how you are perceived. And when you go silent, when you refuse to feed their illusion, they grow angry. Not because you wronged them, but because you stopped playing their game. You will be called cold. You will be labeled distant. Some may even say you've changed. And perhaps you have. But losing people who never truly saw you is not a loss, it is alignment. For in silence, you draw to yourself those rare souls who do not need endless explanation to value you. They respect the quiet assurance that you do not need to perform your worth because it radiates naturally in your actions. The beauty of this silence is that it reshapes your relationships. Manipulators lose interest because they cannot twist your words when you give them none. Users drift away because they cannot guilt you into defending yourself. But those who remain, those are the people who truly matter. They are drawn not to your explanations, but to your presence. They respect you not because you justify yourself, but because you do not. Think about it. Every time you explain why you set a boundary, why you walked away, why you chose peace, you are asking someone to approve of your dignity. But dignity is not up for debate. You do not owe anyone an explanation for valuing your peace. You do not need to convince anyone that your boundaries are valid. The highest form of confidence is to live so aligned with your truth that silence itself becomes your response. This is not the silence of pride, nor of apathy. It is the silence of someone who has nothing left to prove. Someone whose confidence is so steady that misunderstanding cannot shake it. It is the silence of the Stoic, calm, steady, self-assured, and it is the silence that commands respect without ever demanding it. So the next time you feel that urge rising to defend, to explain, to justify, pause. Ask yourself, am I doing this because I believe it will bring clarity or because I fear being misjudged? If it is the latter, hold your tongue. Let silence do the speaking. For the truth of who you are does not require subtitles. And this brings us to the final truth. Silence is not only confidence in itself, it is the foundation for walking away with dignity, leaving behind only the echo of your absence as proof of your strength. Number 6. Detachment in silence teaches the lesson. Have you ever noticed how unsettling it is when someone simply walks away without a word? Not with anger, not with shouting, not with slammed doors, but with quiet detachment. There is a rare kind of power in that moment. Because when you refuse to fight, when you refuse to beg, when you refuse to explain yourself to someone who has already chosen to disregard you, your silence becomes the teacher they never expected. Seneca once said, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." And it is in silence where this suffering begins for the other. When you no longer respond, their mind replays the absence. They sit alone with their guilt, with unanswered questions, with the echo of how you treated them. This kind of detachment speaks louder than any argument ever could. It says, "I no longer need to prove my worth to you. I will not stay where I am not respected. I have learned that peace is more valuable than connection." Most people don't know how to face this energy. They are used to reactions, pleading, anger, desperate attempts at closure. But when you go silent, you leave them with nothing to control, nothing to twist, nothing to feed on. Suddenly they realize they no longer have access to your energy. And that realization terrifies them more than your words ever could. I once heard of a man named Elias who endured constant disrespect in his relationship. Each time he was hurt, he explained himself, hoping things would change. But the cycle repeated until one day Elias said nothing. He simply withdrew, walked away, not in bitterness, but in quiet clarity. His partner expected shouting, expected tears, expected one last attempt to fix things. Instead, there was silence. That silence lingered longer than any explanation. And in that space, Elias learned the real lesson. The lesson wasn't for her, it was for him. He finally understood that his peace required no permission. This is why Stoics were not reactive. They did not chase justice or beg for validation. They knew that people don't change because you scream, "Respect me." If they change at all, it is because your absence forces them to confront what they lost. And if they don't, that's fine too. Because the lesson of silence is not about fixing them, it is about freeing you. Detachment does not mean you no longer care. It means you care too deeply about your own soul to keep it in a place where it is neglected. You don't need to shout, "I'm done." You can simply be done. And that quiet exit, that calm decision, is real power. It is the kind of power that heals you, protects you, and makes you unshakable for whatever comes next. And this is the kind of silence that unsettles those who once thought they had power over you. Do not fear detachment. Step back with calm. Let them sit with the weight of your absence and feel the dignity that rises within you. You no longer need to chase, beg, or explain to prove your worth. Silence is not coldness, but clarity, not weakness, but control. Each time you choose it, you reclaim peace, self-worth, and strength no one can take away. Let silence be your final word, born of unshakable self-respect. Comment with quiet strength and let your voice join others walking this path. If this message resonated, subscribe to stay close. The next step will take you even deeper.